All right, so today we're going to be looking into some pretty fascinating developments in the world of Apple and their much anticipated foldable
Yeah,
device.
this is something people have been talking about for quite a while.
It is, and it looks like the picture's getting a whole lot clearer, maybe even a little bit unexpected.
Oh, really?
Yeah, our mission today is to figure out what this foldable might actually be, and the big question everybody seems to have, what operating system will it actually run?
Oh, that's a good question.
So we've got some analyst reports and industry speculation to go over. And we're hoping
Okay.
to give you the inside track on what might be a really big game changer.
Absolutely, the speculation's been going on for years,
Yeah,
but this is the most concrete information we've seen so far.
it really is.
It suggests a real shift in strategy from Apple.
Okay, well, let's jump into it.
Okay.
The first thing that really jumps out is the sheer size of this rumored device.
Yeah, how big are we talking?
We're talking a huge 18.8-inch screen.
Wow, that's not a phone.
That's what I'm saying. One of the reports even calls it a giant.
So what are we looking at here? It's bigger than an iPad.
Right, and that larger size seems to have caused some initial confusion.
Okay, so what were people thinking it was?
So at first, people weren't sure if this was going to be a supersized iPad Pro or maybe a new MacBook, but in a flexible form factor.
Oh, interesting. So it would be like a hybrid of the two.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and apparently the fact that it doesn't have a built-in physical keyboard really added to that initial mystery.
So how would you type on it?
Exactly. Without a keyboard, the obvious comparison was to the iPad Pro, which uses a touch-first interface.
That makes sense.
But then the whole folding aspect of it
Right.
kept that MacBook idea alive.
Yeah, I can see that.
So you can kind of picture it folding like a clamshell laptop.
Yeah, like a traditional laptop.
Exactly. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, ready.
Analyst Jeff Poo from GF Securities is saying this 18.8-inch foldable is actually going to run macOS.
Oh, wow. That's a bold prediction.
It is, and it kind of positions this device way more with the MacBook family than the iPad world.
Yeah, for sure. Mac OS is definitely a desktop class operating system.
Exactly. And he even calls it a close relative to the MacBook lineup.
So what does that mean for people who wanted Mac OS on the iPad? Do you think they finally listened?
Well, it's definitely interesting because for years people have been asking for macOS on the iPad.
Yeah.
Right.
They want that desktop functionality.
They do.
Yeah.
And Apple has always kept them separate.
Totally.
But this move, especially on such a large foldable, could mean that they're recognizing that some people need that full power of macOS in a portable form.
Yeah, it makes sense for professionals who need to work on the go.
Exactly. And the lack of a fixed keyboard maybe even suggests that they're focusing on touch interaction within macOS.
Oh, that's interesting, like a hybrid interface.
Right, and that MacBook iPad hybrid idea is kind of floating around out there.
So what do we mean by hybrid? Like, would it boot into different modes?
That's the big question. Would it have some sort of unique interface that blends macOS and iPadOS?
Yeah. Or is it just Mac OS with better touch support?
Yeah. And when do we think we'll actually see this thing? The timeline suggests mass production in the second half of 2026.
Okay, so that means we're probably looking at a launch at the end of 2026, maybe early 2027.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's still a ways off, but it gives them time to really perfect the technology.
It does. And building on that, we've also got Mark Gurman's insights from his Power On newsletter.
Okay, what's he saying?
So he mentioned that iOS 19 and macOS 16 will set the stage for new hardware designs.
I see.
And he specifically mentioned foldable devices and touchscreen Macs.
That's intriguing.
It is. And what's interesting is this report is suggesting that we might actually see this foldable macOS device even before we see a touchscreen Mac.
Wow, so they're prioritizing the foldable even over a touchscreen MacBook.
It seems that way, and that raises questions about their priorities.
Yeah.
Right. Both foldable tech and touch capabilities on their laptops seem to be in development.
Right.
But the foldable with macOS seems to further along.
Yeah, that suggests they see a real opportunity there.
Exactly, and it's not just Mark Gurman saying this.
Oh, really?
Jeff Pugh actually cites a Wall Street Journal report as the basis for this whole macOS speculation.
Okay, so it's not just one analyst making this up.
Exactly. Multiple sources are pointing the same direction.
That definitely adds some weight to the rumors.
It does. It does. Now, here's another interesting tidbit.
Okay.
Jeff Pugh's report also talks about a foldable iPhone expected around the same 2026 timeframe.
Interesting. So two different foldable devices from Apple.
Exactly. But this one's much smaller with a 7.8-inch inner display.
Oh, wow. So that's more like a traditional foldable phone.
It is, it is. And there's a brief mention of a connection to iPhone 17 Air technologies.
Huh. So they might be using some of the tech from their phones in the foldables.
Right, which makes you think what specific technologies might be shared.
Yeah, like what could that tell us about the foldables' capabilities?
Now let's get back to the big debate.
Okay.
iPadOS versus macOS.
The age-old question.
Right. We know that Apple has always kept these two worlds totally separate.
Yeah.
Right.
Even though the iPad Pro has gotten super powerful.
Exactly. Some would even say it has desktop-class performance.
It's true. They've gotten really good.
They have, but this report is really pointing to macOS for this giant foldable, and the source even calls that decision pretty plausible.
So what's changed? Why would they do it now?
Right. Given their history of keeping macOS off touch-focused devices, what makes this time different?
Maybe they realized iPadOS just isn't enough for a screen that big.
It's possible.
Maybe the limitations become too apparent on an 18.8-inch screen.
Yeah, you need that full desktop experience for a device that size.
Right, like proper multitasking and file management.
Exactly. And that's really where macOS shines.
It does.
And this brings us to the title of the article. This idea that running macOS on this huge foldable really shows a shift in their product strategy.
Yeah, it's a pretty big departure from what they've done before.
It is. They've always kept the iPad and the Mac in their own separate lanes.
For sure. This is definitely mixing things up.
It is, and for anyone who's been following these rumors for a while, this macOS revelation is probably a huge surprise.
Yeah, I bet a lot of people didn't see this coming.
So to sum it all up for you,
Okay.
the info we've gone over today really points to Apple developing a massive 18.8-inch foldable device.
It's huge.
And here's the big takeaway. It's expected to run macOS.
Wow.
That means Apple's potentially creating a whole new type of portable Mac experience.
Yeah, this isn't just a bigger iPad.
Not at all. And with a potential launch sometime in late 2026 or early 2027, this could be a major evolution in how Apple thinks about its two main computing platforms.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how this shakes things up.
This deep dive leaves us with a really interesting thought. If Apple can pull this off, if they can successfully blend the portability and the flexibility of a foldable design with the full power of macOS,
Yeah.
what does that mean for the future of laptops and tablets as we know them?
That's the big question. Could this be the new standard for personal computing?
Or will it find its own special little niche? It's something to watch closely as we learn more.
For sure. This is just the beginning of the story.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.